Welcome to the Alive and Kicking podcast. I'm your host, Kay Eck, and this is where we talk to ordinary people about their extraordinary lives. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. My guest today is Michael Todd Fink. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Kay.
How
Good to
are
be
you?
here. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm
Happy
so
to be able
happy.
to talk with you.
I'm so happy to have you here because I think you've been on my list of potential guests since the very beginning, which has been over a year now. And
Congratulations on a
thank
year of
you.
podcasting.
Yeah, I know that it's a commitment for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You kind of realize, oh, there's a lot more involved to keep this going and to keep growing it
Yeah, I
in
think one
a
of the
meaningful
things
way.
that's always a surprise to me is like how it really keeps the calendar moving in a sense. You can't really like let go of that timing,
Mm,
which it can be challenging if that's not really what you want to be doing. But
right.
yeah, so
I
so
was working
fun.
on a podcast episode today for my podcast. So yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because that's kind of where I wanted to begin today because I'm a fan of your podcast. And I think I've probably listened to I don't know, 8 or 9 of them. And one of the things that prevents me from listening to all of them is that I can't listen to them just anywhere, like in the car or when I'm doing the dishes, because I need to take notes. And I've also found that your podcasts are very good for plane rides because I'm a little nervous flyer. So you sometimes do spontaneous meditations and of course your voice is so calming that it's like the perfect airplane companion.
That's good. Maybe I need to listen to it on a plane ride because I also get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But
for
yeah,
me,
be
it's
careful driving and listening. You don't want to fall asleep to my boring voice.
well, so I wanted to ask you, so your podcast is really unique in that you bring in so many different sources of wisdom and information and knowledge. And there's basically like no area that you won't go to, no subject that
Mhm.
you won't go to kind of draw in the fullness of an experience for your listeners. So you're pulling in psychology and philosophy and ancient wisdom and anthropology and sociology and music and yoga, and it's just like it's so full. And so I've always wanted to ask you how you prepare for the podcasts that you do.
Well, I do a little bit of research. I mean, I will have something that I'm interested in anyway, and that often becomes the topic. Like I'm interested in free will, or I'm interested in yoga, or I'm interested in healing, physical healing or emotional healing. And I'm deep into something, and so it's really easy for me to talk about it in an organic way. So I don't usually bring any notes or anything because it's the way I would speak if I was meeting a friend for dinner that night while I'm in the middle of an investigation. And that's why I think it has a little bit different flair to it, like you're talking about, because I'm super passionate about it in that moment. You don't really need to take notes to dinner to talk about this thing you're exploring. It's just flowing out of you. And I need it to be that. I mean, sometimes I get a little scared that maybe it'll run out. And I think if it does, I would just have to conclude the podcast because I don't want it to be forced. I don't want it to be scripted or just, but I mean, as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to keep growing, keep exploring. So I feel like I will still want to share something new. And when I'm researching something, there's a few directions I like to go. I'm interested in etymology of words. I have studied Sanskrit in India for some time as well, and I find that to be such an original language. Like, for example, we have 26 letters in our alphabet, but the letter S makes a bunch of different sounds. It can make the S sound or the SH sound, but there's multiple letters to accomplish that in Sanskrit. So it's just much more user friendly and intuitive. But when I go to the origins of words, I feel like I can sort of trace back meaning of concepts. So that's a direction I like to go. I've studied psychology throughout my adult life. I graduated from psychology at Georgetown. So that's sort of a like a base for me to interpret the world, or our mental experiences at least. And I was very interested in neuropsychology there. I had really wonderful teachers at my university that were open to the other ways that I like to explore the world. And I've been meditating for over 20 years. So I have these, and as you know, I play music. I've played in a band for many years. So I think that this philosopher and scientist David Bohm said it well when he described the getting at truth, and then the expression of truth really kind of has three modes: artistic, scientific, and mystical.
Mm.
And I've been going deep into those three sides. And so I think that's what's special, maybe, or that's what resonates with people, because it's very common for somebody to really get attached to one of those three. You know, I've been that way myself as an artist, or as somebody trying to have some kind of career as a clinician at times. But it just doesn't work for me to just stay in any one of those three streams, because I feel like I'm not getting the full view
Mm.
of a topic or an idea or concept. I
Yeah,
appreciate you asking, and appreciating that aspect of the podcast.
that's amazing in so many ways. One is I was afraid you were going to say that because I wanted to think like, oh, you have this whole thing prepared and you're going to go all these different places but the fact that you're able to bring it out in the moment is kind of fantastic and mind-boggling to me. So I love that, and I also love this idea of taking three different approaches to any one topic. I think that if we all had the presence to do that, how much wider our
Mhm.
view would be. Like you could bring the artistic, the scientific, and the mystic into every aspect of your life and thought. I'm gonna write that down in my notes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's very beautiful, I think, and I agree. And I try to do that. I try to look at it from through those three lenses.
Have
And
you
maybe one of the three is more more dominant, but but just being aware of it gives you more options. And there's I have found there's nothing I can do to prepare for a talk, for a podcast, that can make me sound natural or feel natural, because that's not how nature works. And so I've just kind of let go of that. And if I stumble or fall or forget, I've grown to find peace in those moments. And I'm okay with waiting if I'm not sure what the next thing I'm going to say is. And I think a lot of that just comes from performing also, and playing music, and leaving so much up to improvisation and interpretation based on the energy. I mean, if you go for our band, if we went into a concert with a rigid idea of how we would do it, you would miss an opportunity. Like, if an audience is riding on the energy of the music and dancing their hearts out, and you just decide that we're going to stop that, then you're just missing an opportunity for connection because of the rigidness of the script. And so we had a night once where we started at 1 a.m. at a festival, and we were still playing when the sun came up, because there was no one after us, there were no constraints, and nobody was concerned with time, and we just let it breathe as long as it needed to.
That's amazing. I think of the amount of presence and connection that you would have to have individually and amongst each other in order to be able to perform like that. But I feel the same way. I don't prepare traditionally for my podcast. I don't prepare questions because I found that in the beginning I started out doing it that way, and I found that it even just the slightest turn to look at my notes would take me out of the connection, out of the presence that I had with my guest. And so, but ditching the notes and the plan requires a lot of trust.
Hmm.
Trust and comfort in the quiet spaces that something is going to come to you through you, you know.
It's special to access that trust because you aren't even giving yourself an opportunity without those experiments, right? and and again, I just want to say, like, there's nothing wrong with having a script. I mean, I have played music according to a piece of music, and I've given speeches and I've read poems and things like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just simply talking about, the way of the podcast that you appreciate, and what's special about those kind of moments, like what's special about a conversation with a friend. And and I've just tried to expand on that.
Yeah. So, your ability to recall all these different pieces of wisdom, threads of wisdom, was that something that you've always had? What was your experience of that growing up? Were you like a really sharp kid or?
I gave my high school commencement speech in that same way. I had no notes or anything, and I had some long awkward pauses, I remember. Um, but I'm just strange. I'm not a good student, although I've gotten good grades and went to good schools and stuff. I'm not a good student in the sense I don't like the way it is. I don't fit with the way it is. And I'm not organized. I don't like what we think of as organization here in America. It's uncomfortable to me. I don't. I mean, someone else is different, and I have no judgment of that. It's just about what, like, is natural for me. So my podcasts, though, that, for instance, are not very structured. I mean, they're not like an hour long every time, and they're definitely not linear. You know how, like, a lot of podcasts will be like, and here's our intro, and here's, and again, I have no problem with that. That's fine, and that's how some people learn, and some people are able to use a formula like that really, really well. It's just not natural to me.
Mhm,
And so, yeah, I mean, I can remember things, but I may remember it at an odd time. I may remember it at the end. I may remember something that was really important after the podcast, and then maybe I'll put it in an intro. So more recently, I've included an intro to the podcast, which I record later on, which is nice because if I listen back to that talk, I may get more ideas. I may even think differently about it, and I'm okay with that. So that's another trust. I trust that people accept that I can change my mind, or that I made a mistake. I said it wrong, or the study I quoted wasn't the right study, or it didn't happen exactly that way. And when I find that out, I'll own that and I'll share that. I have no problem with that.
yeah. I think that's great. An example of that, I was listening to one of the podcasts recently, and you were talking about how the I think the largest fire in human history took place in China in 1980 something, and I think you said
It was
20
20.
acres
Yeah, it was
instead of
20
20 million.
acres. It's like a backyard fire. 20 million acres is what I meant to say.
And that kind of even makes the 20 million even more like
Wow.
it's like wow, yeah,
Right.
yeah, hard to imagine. So, what was your childhood like?
Uh, it was beautiful in many respects. When I talk about growing up with my brother, we sometimes are like, whoa, we had we had very different experiences. Well, I was born in California because my dad was in the Navy, stationed out of the Bay Area. And in the first 5 years there, he was traveling to Asia. And I think that was meaningful for me because I ultimately went to India and spent time in Asia and had transformative experiences in Asia. But it just kind of planted a seed in me of Eastern wisdom, that he was in Japan and he was in Hong Kong and he studied karate and mastered nunchucks in this exotic part of the world. And it just seemed like Asia was so different than everywhere else. So that was kind of always expanding in me as a kid. We moved around a lot after that. We're also really poor, um, by all metrics, but it never really occurred to me because I had nothing to compare it to. And my parents were really present and engaged and loving, and my mother was just so wonderful. They never said there was things we couldn't do. If there was something I wanted to do, we would find a way. I mean, but at some of our childhood, like we didn't even have a home. I can remember some one year we were living in the basement of a friend. So I mean, technically on the border of homelessness for part of my childhood, but never felt that way. The other thing, that was always important to our dad was to be close to nature. So even if we were homeless, we would be homeless near forest. and and when you have access to nature as a kid, he instilled in us the joy of the natural world. You feel so rich in nature. When you're walking in among the trees, there's no thought of wealth and possession, and there's nothing to prove about yourself. You're just part of the whole. And I had those experiences all the time. Those were my first spiritual experiences, would be in nature, because like I said, probably moved more than a dozen times growing up, but there was always a forest preserve or a forest nearby that I could go into. So I felt very rich in those spaces and had spiritual experiences in those spaces. And my parents were great. They were artistic and completely accepting of me being expressive. And when I went to school and wanted to study music and psychology and wanted to be in a band with my brother, they had no problem with it. They felt like you do what feels right to you. So I had parents that gave a lot of freedom too, which isn't always the case. I see a lot of families where parents are really kind of hovering over their adult children or controlling. My parents, by the time I was like 14, 15, really gave me a long leash, but not that they didn't care about what I did. They just weren't going to control. And so I think with that kind of trust, with that kind of freedom, and still having them very interested in me and supportive of me, I I just kind of gravitated towards trying to be mature and make good use of the freedoms that I had.
Mm. That I think that I grew up. I'm older than you, so I grew up in the like late '60s and '70s, and I had a similar experience. We had no money, but I was not really aware of that because nobody around me had any money. So we didn't. Nobody took family vacations that I knew. Nobody,
Right. We
had,
never took family. I think there was one trip I took in my whole childhood.
yeah.
I
So
never went anywhere other than when it was time to move.
hey, kids are going on vacation, and we're staying.
Yeah.
Wow, that's but I also had the experience of having this incredibly long leash. I can remember just as a really young kid riding my bike to 3 or 4 miles away to some store or something that I wanted to get some candy at, or we had this. I lived in the suburbs, and there was this area next to the train tracks that we called the field because it was undeveloped, and to me it felt like nature. It felt like the wild, and I did so much of my growing up in that space. And what do you think that lack of a tether does for you in your development.
Well, I think that there's probably a sweet spot, and it depends on the personality of the child. But yeah, I was also going to say that there weren't all the devices when you were growing up, right? So there weren't all these ways to compare. Like now, for me, I bet like to go through childhood now with the limited resources that my family had, it might have been psychologically painful because I would be constantly able to see what other people have and what they're doing. I mean, all you would see is a little bit at school, and so, you know, you have everything in nature, but now like there's less inclination to go into nature for kids, I think.
Yeah.
But I think the lack of a tether and the freedom builds trust, because like especially like a teenager wants independence, but the parents are often trying to balance that with the fear of them making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a problem when you prevent kids from making mistakes, because it's how we learn, it's how we grow. So I have a friend who gave a TED talk about this, letting your kids fail, and the importance of that, not to be so protective or so influential that they don't know how to make a mistake, and they don't know how to sit with that, or they don't know how it feels to disappoint somebody and how to rectify that.
Or to, yeah, yeah. I have experience on both sides of that because I have 4 kids, and I think it's harder, it's more difficult to allow your children to fail than to fail
Mm-hmm.
yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
you know that it's no big deal. But for some reason, there's just that much more difficulty when you're watching someone that you love face being hurt or hurting someone or failing in that way. It's challenging. It's really challenging.
I
And
bet. And
and I think that there's, we're fed also, by the media, the danger of living in the world today that probably hasn't shifted all that much. There's probably more danger online than there is in your neighborhood, but I think that's probably contributed to it a little bit. That we have the perception that childhood is more dangerous now than it was then.
yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about your spiritual experiences and how that life developed for you?
Well, like I said, I had some in nature. The One of the earliest ones in nature would just be sitting there and feeling like all the other stuff isn't real. The drama of humanity is just that. It's just a play. It's not something that it needs to be all consuming. And I would, as a small kid, I would think, if there wasn't this thing of consciousness, like if I wasn't conscious of people and nature and all that, what would the universe be like? And that was my question. And I think if you have some line of inquiry like that about truth, because that's what spirituality is to me. It's nothing more than trying to get at what's true. Everything else I think falls under religion and um, culture. But for me, it was about trying to, and not that I wouldn't deviate into those other domains, but in I cite that time because that was a moment where I was trying to understand what's true. I didn't feel like my ordinary experience was true
Mm.
or real. And so I would close my eyes and I would just let go. And I get this really weird feeling like I didn't exist. And it was just so profound, um, for a kid to feel like there's something untrue about my ordinary belief system and my ordinary way of thinking about myself. But it was a little scary to feel like I don't really exist. Or when I'm in nature with eyes closed and I have a meditative experience, I don't know what to do with that because I eventually have to open my eyes and come back. And I stopped doing it after a while. I stopped thinking about those things and tried to just think about regular things because it didn't have any support. And later I realized like that's why connecting with a teacher or um, spiritual communities can have an important place in one's journey. So eventually I got into it again and started studying yoga, meditation. I mean, I became very hungry for spiritual knowledge by the time I graduated high school. And so everything I was doing in between my studies was seeking out wisdom. And I met lots of teachers. I went on a retreat with a shaman. I learned different things with energy. I never felt satisfied with anything though. I would learn things and I would think, that's nice or that can be helpful for something, but it didn't solve my question. And then I read a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. You ever heard of that book?
Yeah.
And the yoga that he was practicing, I thought I need to learn that. And I found a woman in the area who taught this to people in her home. She taught it to me. Then she got me connected to a master of that tradition in India, a monastic, and just really a great, renowned world teacher. And he was compassionate enough to let me come closer and study near him and go to India. And by, I think, being in the company of a truly great, wise master helped me to build the environment that I needed to like continue with that original pursuit in a way that was supportive, was conducive. And he helped create that space in India where I could explore that fully.
Hmm.
By the time I came back and continued playing music and doing things, people would sense things about me and ask questions about where I've been and my experiences. And then after a while, I just realized that it's going to keep happening. People are going to keep asking, and I'm going to keep getting requests to share things. So then I just eventually gave into it. I had no intention of doing that. I just accepted that, somebody put it like this once, like if you had a lot of money, you wouldn't just hide it. So they're like, if you know things that would be healing for people or transformative for people, but you're not going to share it just because it was only for you, then I kind of saw some selfishness in that and kind of changed my attitude towards leading, teaching, having a podcast, and so on.
Yeah. So when was that in your life? Was it after college?
Which part?
The part where you started to come onto your spiritual path and then you
That was
accepted.
after college. I was 25 years old.
So how do you recognize for yourself the truth in what someone else has to say? How do you find a teacher like that?
I don't really know. I mean, I do think there's some truth in the adage that when you're ready, a teacher will come. I don't know that a teacher is necessary for everybody. I think it was in my case, or I thought it was, and so it was. But I think if you are just honest with yourself when you're learning from somebody, your body, your heart will tell you this is aligning with something true, or it's not. I mean, I met a lot of students on my spiritual journey that had a lot of cognitive dissonance. I mean, one group of people tried to get me to go with them to somewhere in Southeast Asia to be with a teacher, because you can do drugs with the teacher. Not that like I have anything against drugs, but they were trying to adapt the teacher. They were trying to find a teacher that will accommodate their ego. And I was looking for a teacher that would kind of destroy mine. Um, so I mean, I feel like you can really get lost for a while if you do that. You may have a teacher, and if you're finding a teacher that accommodates your ignorance, I'm sorry to put that bluntly, that accommodates one's ignorance, that's not going to help you at all. I mean, that can get you lost for your whole life, I think.
Mm.
So there are strategies, I think, to try to find the teacher. And there are books about like a guru disciple relationship that I think have a tremendous amount of wisdom. And there's books like the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, just like historical texts, classics that one ought to refer to if they were really going to pursue that, so that you're not just giving up your life or pursuing something that's just leading you astray. I think it's a very serious thing, and it's a delicate thing. Um, we're talking about one's mind here and the fight for our mind.
Yeah, it is very serious, and I came to some conclusion some time ago that if if the teacher weren't still learning, then that relationship was no longer right for me. I needed to see that the truth is ever expanding. There's no set box called truth that you open up and then you know it. It's like an evolving process. And I think it's easy for any of us to get trapped in our own little boxes of what we think that the truth is. And I also believe that there can be multiple truths. So you understand one truth and I can understand completely different, and they're both true and to us, you know. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of the last podcast that I listened to of yours, which was on skepticism. And toward the end of the podcast, it was like getting really into this idea of reality, what is true, and what reality could be, and what reality might be. And that was kind of trippy there toward the end. And
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes that's where you take people, is to the edge of understanding. And yeah, wow.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I do think I hear what you're saying, Kay, and that makes sense. I think at some point on this path, you have to strip everything away. I mean, any shred, and this is just like if you really want to know like who we are, every belief, is any belief can become like the little bit of ego that we cling on to, or the little bit of an identity. I have a belief, I exist. I think something, therefore I am. But I mean, I think at some point we do have to shed everything, just like strip everything away and start back from nothing. I don't know anything. I don't know a damn thing. And anything that comes up, well, I think, what is that? Where does that thought come from? Does it come from what we think of as true, or is it coming from a culture? Is it coming from a book, a religion? So yeah, I mean, and that is a brutal, you know, undertaking. And I don't think it's for everybody, but some people feel like they can't live without, they can't live with themselves, their idea of themselves, and we'll have to do that kind of work.
Yeah. That experience that you had as a child or kid, when you had such a profound experience and there was no way to really manage it at that age, that you withdrew from it. I find myself doing that all the time. And it's like I have to come back into my human experience, like fully plant myself in my human experience. Like, what am I going to cook? What are
Mhm.
my family relationships? What does my body need? What do I enjoy like on the earthly plane? And forget all about the spiritual stuff because it can become like a vortex, you know, that you can kind of get lost in. Have you had other experiences of having to pull back from your
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've had experiences that just annihilate have annihilated me. I don't talk about them much, and I think, but there is a fundamental um, premise about our experience as human, and that is that it's going to end, and it ends any moment. Now, I mean, to just come to terms with that, like we can do a bunch of things to avoid thinking about that, and all that's going to do is give us a really crappy death, I think, you know, meaning like we can't be present at the grand finale because we didn't get ourselves ready to watch it, we didn't grab a seat.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's completely normal and natural that we'll have to shift back and forth, because it's sort of like working, um let's say a branch with like some water so that you can bring the ends together and complete this circuit of knowledge. But if I just do it too quickly, it'll just snap, and then I lose my mind. um and so I have to like release and pull again and release, and I think that's what you're talking about. Sometimes I have to release from thinking about spirituality as something separate, maybe if I put it that way, like a
Mhm.
separate endeavor, and to just make dinner. But it's really not separate. It's just like I have to let go of the idea that there's a separate pursuit. Because yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But this, for me, this anxiety about death is just like it's always like right here, and so I'll step back or do something that I think is like not spiritual. I don't really think of life like that anymore, but just like something that I guess you could say is grounding for my physical health. My physical health's gotten bad at times, I think, because of too much intellectualization. And like this year has been for me just totally taking care of my body more. But now I'm finding like that is like still no different than everything else I was doing. Trying to take care of my body is can be a very zen like experience. But this hovering specter of death never like goes away from me, and that was what it was as a kid. And that first experience as a little kid was just because I gave up everything. I gave up every idea about what a spiritual experience was or what spirituality was. I don't know why. I mean, maybe there's something to past lives and stuff. I don't really think about that much. But it was just like I don't know anything. I don't have anything, and that led me into it.
So when you talk about some of those experiences about being annihilated, I mean, I've certainly experienced like the annihilation of who I thought I was in a lot of instances. What was that experience like for you, if you can share?
Well, I wouldn't volunteer this um, reflection because it's hard to put into words, and it can create confusion to talk about, I think. But you asked, and I respect the question. So for me, I had an experience once where basically, and it wasn't a meditative experience. It wasn't like I was sitting in meditation or something. I was just like walking across the room. I heard a sound. I looked for the sound. I realized there was no place the sound was coming from. It wasn't inside, it wasn't outside. And it got louder and louder and louder. And then it was accompanied by a light that wasn't inside or outside. And it literally just started to destroy my sense of self. And first thing to go was my body. Like I had no sense of a physical form. And, but then it started to dissolve my mind. And that annihilation was almost complete, I feel like, except there was just some spark of fear, some seed of fear that sprouted back into this experience. And yeah, so that was a time where it was like I clawed my way out of the abyss, I feel like. But I'm not proud of that or anything. I mean, I feel like meditation is people wouldn't know that probably, but deep meditation is preparing you for the end of your selfhood. And by selfhood I mean like little s. We think we're this body, but we know this body's not going to last. And when people are talking about something that's true or eternal, like their soul, they don't talk about it from I mean, as that. They say like, I believe my soul is going to go to heaven. Well, what good is that for you if your soul goes to heaven? Your soul and your car and your pet can go to heaven, but where do you go? And they can't say I'm going to heaven because they think, and we all think until this awakening or realization, that we're the body.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it creates an attachment to the body. So I mean, what I share with people is not to ignore the body or reject the body. That's not what I'm getting at here. Like you shouldn't do that with anything that you're in contact with, your pets, your belongings. It's a relationship, I think, of stewardship
Of the self,
of the body.
of the body. Wow, I never really contemplated that that question about where the small self, the small self goes. I just assumed that it's it's a finite organism and I am not.
Right, right. We have to answer the question. We have to solve the question, who am I, before we could know where I go. But
Mm,
people try to find out where they go, or if there's life after death, before proving that there's life before death, before knowing what life before death is.
hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. So I'm really interested in your perspective of meditation being the preparation for the death of the self. Of course, I've heard that before, but I also thought there was, other aspects to explore within meditation. So can you take us through that a little bit about, kind of presenting the fullness of the purpose of meditation and what it can do for you?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say that in my experience, I tend to think that meditation fits in as part of a broader philosophical inquiry into reality. Meaning, if someone just tries to do a contemplative practice, I don't know that will work in the way that we're talking about. So, like, I feel like something like the Yoga Sutras has a lot of wisdom, in the sense that when you integrate um, certain disciplines with asana, like for instance, it would be hard to sit for meditation if your body's got a lot of pain, if you haven't taken care of the body. You may not get to that place where there can be enough stillness, breathing, um, turning the senses inward, learning how to concentrate. So I try to find a modern way to share that wisdom with people, giving people contemplative practices. Throughout the podcast, we talk about those principles that help people refine their life, refine their senses. So this is a systematic way, which includes meditation, to gain the experience of reality. So when we think we're the body and you start to meditate, you will start to have the experience that your sense of self doesn't map on to reality. Like something simple, we think we're the author of our thoughts, but you can't stop your thoughts just like that. In the same way, you can't stop digesting your food or pause your food in the intestines until you choose. But it takes mindfulness, it takes awareness to realize that those things are happening. I don't do them. Our language is what confuses us. We say things like, I forgot what I was going to tell you, Kay. But is forgetting actually something that you do? You know, it'd be more accurate to say file not found. But you're not going to realize this. You're not going to be able to cut through some of that cultural conditioning without practicing the awareness. And so the awareness is where a person's locus will start to shift to see, like, oh, I have a body. And then you can start to figure out what is the I. And awareness would be closer to that than the body. And so it's preparing us, yeah, because everything else is transient and ephemeral, and everybody is trying to grab onto something stable, but there's nothing to hold on to. So that's why I say, it's preparing us for what is already our destiny, but people don't want to face it. So I think, meditation is a way to wade into those waters. Sam Harris, for example, on his podcast, Making Sense, talks about psychedelics a lot, but he says, like, psychedelics are like being shot out of yourself with a rocket. And meditation is a way to, like, wade into the waters of selflessness.
And yeah, it's definitely a gentler. Oh my gosh. Wow. So how do you recommend that people get started with meditation? Because some of the things that you're saying today are causing me to reflect that I think a lot of modern culture is telling us that meditation is like a solution to the human predicament, and or whatever might be going on. Like, for instance, if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, or you're unsure, you're in doubt, things like that, that it's meditation's becoming more talked about as a practice, a helpful practice. And I feel like, yes, and also the opposite is true, that it can bring you to some understandings that are confusing, and that require further inquiry. So, how do you recommend that people enter into that, wade into that river?
It's a good question. And it does depend on what people are seeking, right? Because if I'm seeking a resolution to my anxiety, that's different than seeking to know the truth about who I am. And mindfulness practices and yoga, they help with all these other things. But our culture is, made an enemy out of emotion, and emotion is it just is. I don't even think the point of mindfulness or meditation is to eliminate emotion. Emotion is just a natural part, is part of nature, like storms. A place isn't good because it has no clouds. A weather isn't good because there's not rain, even though culturally we describe it as such. And I think that same confusion happens with self-inquiry. So mindfulness, for instance, its design is not to feel better, it's to get better at feeling. Actually, our problem, our predicament, as you put it, with our emotional experience is that we reject what's natural. We suppress our feelings. We find really creative ways to numb ourselves, to stuff and ourselves, I mean, our experiences, to stuff emotions as they arise, to hold on to them after they're trying to go. And that creates unnatural disturbances. But mindfulness practice allows a person to feel. So you just become more in the flow, and an emotion will come just like rain will come, but only rarely is a like a storm going to last a long time. It has its natural motion. We don't have to push the clouds. They're already moving. There's a but nobody sees it. You just look and you go, it's great. I got to do something. I got to fix it. You look at your feeling and you just see, I'm sad. I got to solve it. I got to get rid of it. But mindfulness shows you that it's moving, that it's dynamic, and that allows us to be free because I don't have to hold on to or push or reject or block what's natural.
Yeah, I think that is so powerful that when you do come face to face with your emotions and start to feel them, that again, it comes back to the trust, knowing that as you experience them, they're going to change, they're going to move on, new things are going to present. There's so much about this life that is just about trust. It's it's amazing, really, that yeah. Um, I I recently came across a teacher who was talking about using meditation like for a specific purpose to manifest something, and that had never occurred to me before. I've never gone into meditation with any sort of purpose in mind, like with a goal. I thought that, it was just entering into the present and whatever came up was kind of worth looking at. How do you view that? Do you use meditation in different ways?
No, but I don't I don't judge those who do. And I think it's quite normal to desire things, to want things, and to want to be successful, to want a family. I mean, I want those things too, in the sense that I want to eat well, I want to sleep well, I want companionship, I want connection. I mean, the body wants that. Um, but but I'm learning that everything I could possibly desire is tied to another desire, except wisdom. Because wisdom destroys suffering. Wisdom dissolves everything, and wisdom lasts. Everything that you can desire, nothing wrong with wanting something. It can't last. You eat something and then it passes. You have some success. Doesn't matter what kind of success, the highest success, and then it passes. And then you're not the top dog anymore. So there will have to be another desire. And so all I'm talking about is with meditation being what it is, I don't use it to get me more enmeshed in that cycle. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I use it and is just to try to get closer to what's true and to release my attachment to things that are untrue.
So, how do you get comfortable in that space between truth and not knowing? Because it feels like you're perpetually there. And that can that can feel a little uncertain or wobbly. How do you get comfortable there?
I don't get comfortable. I mean, I'm an uncomfortable person. Um, but I've been doing cold showers and cryotherapy for back problems and other health issues. And I'm getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So what you're talking about, like being uncertain is not comfortable, but it doesn't have to be rejected. I had an experience yesterday in the cryo chamber. I'm sitting, not sitting, standing in there, fully enclosed. So it's a whole body chamber, and it was minus 202 degrees Fahrenheit. And after 3 minutes, my time was up. But I had gotten so comfortable with being uncomfortable, I didn't want to get out.
Hmm.
I was wishing I could tell the staff person facilitating the session for me, can I just stay? And so that's what I think of with your question, that we just need to get exposed to being uncomfortable. It's got to be willing to get in the cold tub, because it eventually passes. Like eventually I get out of the chamber and you feel more alive. You feel a certain kind of vitality that you didn't have before you entered the uncomfortable environment.
Hmm.
So when you understand that, you're willing to do it because it's like everything else, it's impermanent.
Hmm. Hmm.
No matter what my suffering is, I mean, like I suffer like anybody else. I know it's going to pass. The season of suffering, the season of bad luck, like I feel like, man, in the last year, I had some really bad luck, but so did everybody, right? Because it's a pandemic. But then it passes. And it's like another example of like, God, why did I not trust in myself, in nature, that just plant the seeds of success in the season of failure and everything passes. And somebody may say, no, some things don't pass. Some of your suffering, is going to kill you. Yeah, when it kills you, it passes.
I have that experience. I have had that experience throughout my life because I was always an athlete. So I was always hurting myself in some way. I always had some kind of
Me
injury or
too.
strain, or, you just get used to that. And I noticed a few years back when I was really doing a lot of yoga that if I tried to dissect and address my physical situation, I might do some different poses to try and strengthen different areas. I might get more massages. I might do some acupuncture or go to the chiropractor, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I would do a lot of these things for a lot of time. And on the occasion that they didn't ever help, eventually, if I just forgot about them and just said, like, forget it, like I just throw up my hands, eventually they would resolve themselves. And I've had this situation with my hand that is, it's been, I've had it for a year and a half. It's extremely painful. But nothing I've tried has helped. And I'm kind of in that position now where it's just like, oh, well, like it's just,
Throw up that hand,
sometimes I want to like cut off my
literally and
finger.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know what you mean, though. That
Yeah.
was actually my question for you today.
Mm,
Have you had a situation like that, and what wisdom came out of it?
yeah. That's it. Like, I'm not always in charge of what happens, but everything will pass. Definitely. Well, this seems like a great spot for us to move into our lightning round. And I just want to confess right from the start that the questions I have for you are not light or fast.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll do
In
my
fact,
best then.
but they're perfect for you because,
Okay.
yeah. Um, so, and in fact, the first question has three parts. And it was a little bit about what I wanted to talk to you about after the podcast. I just decided to ask you in the podcast. So, one, what do you think revelation is? Where does it come from? And what is your experience of it?
That is deep. That's not lightning. That's um, well, I think revelation has a very religious uh, connotation now because it's a book in the Bible and people talk about divine revelation. But I think that much of spiritual growth is not, well, I would say all of it is not something you acquire. It's something you lose. You lose attachment to what's unreal. And that doesn't have anything to do with religious beliefs that you need to take on. So revelation is just simply, to me, is that the truth is always the truth. I'm not saying here's the truth or this is the truth or that's the truth. Whatever is true, was true, is true, will be true. And if it's covered up, it doesn't make it untrue. Like gold buried or gold covered in dirt is still gold. That's and the spiritual work is just simply removing the dirt, the non-gold. Like Michelangelo carving the angel out of stone is revelation. The angel is already in there, right? He's only removing the non-angel. It's such a beautiful art form where all you do is shed, you don't add. And spiritual life is a little bit like that.
Mm. I love reductive sculpture. I love doing it and looking at it, but the process of doing it is incredible. Just for that reason that
Mm-hmm.
you're tapping into something that's already there and it's just revealing itself to you. So is it relevant to ask where this comes from, where something like revelation comes from?
Well, I don't think it comes from any particular place. Um, if you can't say you can go find it here. It comes from our experience. I mean, it comes from the heart of our every experience. It comes from like I make a mistake or I think I'm making a mistake, and when I peel back what I think about myself, when I peel layers, then then wisdom reveals itself.
Mm.
It's available in every experience, though, I think. Pleasant, unpleasant, successful, unsuccessful. In your relationships showing us something about ourselves if we would just peel.
Yeah,
Not peel away the relationship, I'm saying peel away our attachments, our insecurities about it.
yeah. So that it feels like that is like allowing every moment and every situation to reveal itself to you, reveal something to you, that
Mm-hmm.
every moment has the potential to be revelatory in
I
some
think
way
so.
if we're paying attention and if we desire it. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, question number two, technically. What was your first airplane flight like?
I don't remember anything out of the ordinary other than just, oh my God, I'm in the air. I think I was a junior in high school. I may have been on a plane as a baby, but I have no recollection of that.
Mm.
So, as a junior in high school, I attended a youth leadership conference in Washington, D.C. It's the only place that I really traveled to on my own. And that's why I went to school there, because that was all I knew outside of wherever I was living. And I mean, I just remember it was a great adventure. I flew by myself. I went to a city I'd never been to, found my way, and then came back there a year later for college.
Mm, beautiful. I think about when my oldest son was a senior in high school, he neither myself or his dad could accompany him to this college orientation at University of Colorado Boulder. So he had to go by himself, figure out how to get from Denver to Boulder, figure out how to find out where he was supposed to be. And at the time, I was feeling, excuse me, so awful about that, that he had to do it on his own. But I think it actually led him to a life that was rather um, expansive. He ended up going to school in the UK and has lived there for 10 years. He's recently come
Wow.
back, but yeah, so he's been on his own quite a bit since then. So it always like goes back to our initial earlier in the conversation about letting go. Okay, next question. How has the last year and a half changed you?
Well, everything I was working towards either stopped or ended altogether. I had to cancel retreats and programs and everything I was building towards with this with the work that I do just came to a screeching halt. And I did my best to just accept that and pivot. But again, it was a reminder that you don't have control and not to be attached, even as an artist, not to be attached to what you're painting with your life. Just simply do your work and step back. And I started writing reflections during my time, most when I was spending more time alone or in solitude. Started writing reflections and sharing them and getting feedback from people on social media. And now I'm organizing it into a book. It's almost finished.
Yeah, I can really relate to the step that you took. You talked about recently about actually making the book physical and shuffling the pages around because that's what I've done with my books. They did not make sense to me until I was able to get them in the physical, and then they just started to shuffle
Yeah,
themselves.
printing them out, right?
Yeah,
And I'm excited for your book, by the way.
yeah. Thank you, thank you.
That's
Me too.
awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. This experience that you had of having to let go of everything that you had been working toward and planning on reminds me so much of having a miscarriage. And you like the minute that you know that you're going to have a baby, your entire life takes a turn and is now has an order. It has a date that, or you know, a presumed date where everything is going to shift. And when you lose that pregnancy, it's like the grieving process is it's intense to let go of you know what you had expected to happen. And I don't think it's, I mean, obviously a miscarriage is huge, you know, it's absolutely huge. And but so are all our dreams, you know, that we build for ourselves. So how can we build the dream
Yeah.
and not be too attached to it?
But that is a big dream. And because it's not just like a dream job that you'll work for some years, it's a dream life that you plan to be a part of for the rest of your life. And I mean, that is a painful bubble to pop of expectation. But I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry you've gone through that, and there's wisdom in the letting go of things not meant for us or not meant in that way at that time,
Yeah,
and the release of control. I think leads to acceptance. It's not what you want or what you envisioned, but you realize at some point that the resistance to what is limits us.
yeah. And that's the painful part of it is
Hmm.
hanging on to the what you thought was going to happen and how it was going to be. Um, what always makes you laugh?
Seinfeld. I'm disappointed they took it off Hulu. I always find something funny in Seinfeld, The Office, but but I tend to find humor in the moment. I make mistakes. I say things that I think were stupid, and I try to laugh at myself. I can't believe some of the things that my mind puts out into words sometimes, and I try to find humor in it,
Yeah,
in the strangeness of this life.
yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Um, do you wrestle with the idea of aging?
I'm starting to wrestle more. uh, I've gotten into more interested in martial arts lately. Um, I'm just jumping off the wrestling. Yeah, I do wrestle with pain. Uh, like if aging was just simply going gray or having wrinkles, yeah, I mean, I would. So it's weird because I'm getting a lot more pain as I age, but people are always telling me you don't look like you're aging, and I feel that I'm aging, but it's not showing. And I'm like, I would trade the feeling of pain for the showing. But we don't have control over these things. I mean, there's genetics and there's other things. I think there needs to be a balance, and there's not a good balance in society because youthfulness is the value of our culture. So aging has kind of become like a shameful thing in our society. And it's really sad because, like I see people not wanting to be called grandma or grandpa, and people doing whatever they can to not look like they're aging, as if that's somehow like some proof of success in life. Like, oh, you must have done something right. And it's just like ignoring so many factors that people have no control over. I don't know when I'm going to die. I mean, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow and all my youthfulness doesn't matter. There's not a healthy balance of aging gracefully while taking care of your body. So this isn't about neglecting your body. And very few people can do that, can age gracefully. But part of that is our society celebrating beauty in all its forms, not just beauty being youthfulness, because that's not the only thing that's beautiful. That's what my whole TED talk was about. Um,
Mhm.
the beauty of imperfection, the beauty of incompleteness, and so on. And that's the problem, is that we have a narrowly defined view of beauty, and so people don't want to age, and it's bad for society in the sense that we lack true elders, people that are in the elder stage, own that space, and can be accessed by the community and celebrated by the community
Mhm.
as the wise people that they are. And other cultures have celebrated the wisdom and the beauty of old age, like in parts of China, parts of Japan. I think that factors into their longevity, when aging is something to look forward to and not to dread, because your stock comes down. And it's true in the material sense that our value goes down as we age in this system. But there are other systems where your stock rises as you age. And so people can age more gracefully because they actually want to derive the benefits that the society provides in that system. When your value goes up as an elder, as a wise person, you don't want to miss that, by so the reverse would be true there. Like, damn, I'm old, but I don't have any gray. So I don't get any of the benefit of. So much of this is cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
I struggle with it though, because I mean I struggle mostly with
Mhm.
the pain that comes like in my hip from years of being athletic, and bugs in my genetics that I share with my dad. And I'm just trying to find a balance of doing what I can without being obsessed with it,
Yeah.
because I can't prevent it all. But I don't want to be neglectful of my body either. And so that this year has been a big learning experience for me to find that balance.
Yeah. My personal journey with that is like I'm amazed at how I appreciate and don't I appreciate aging so much in other people, and I can't turn that same appreciation onto myself. I'm so much more critical of myself in ways that I would never judge anyone else, like not even close. And the other experience, so I grapple with that a little bit, and from time to time, like I go in and out of that. Um, the I forgot what I was going to say about aging, so I'll just move on to the next
Well,
question.
I just want to add one more
Yeah,
thing to that. I said I don't really care about reincarnation or think about past lives at all. But this is the one instance where I think it would have real value for the society. Like if we knew for a fact, like as I'm older, if I know like as a 80-year-old man, I'm literally 2 years away from birthing in a hospital and being a helpless infant, then it'd be like, let me be old. Let me enjoy this because it's going to be 80 years or 100 years before I get to be old again. If we just knew that there was this cycle and you knew it, it wasn't
right.
just a wild theory, then I think people would just be like, that's where I'm at on the Ferris wheel. It's all good, you know?
Yeah, totally, totally. Oh my gosh, yeah. I sometimes think like, what if this were my last incarnation on Earth? What
Mm.
as a human, what would I want to experience? And that is really potent for me because when you're busy, you can skip over experiences and not fully appreciate what it means to be in a human body because we're so
Yeah.
used to it. We sometimes forget like what a miracle it is to touch a cactus or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so my
That's,
final
that's wise.
question for you is what remains undone for you?
I think I'm meant to release this book at some point. It's not finished yet. I think about this sometimes. I think I was meant to make music. I was meant to make these talks, this podcast. I think I was meant to make a book. And I don't know, maybe there'll be more books, but it feels like this is the third creative piece, final piece in the sense of literature, like some written things. I don't know how much literature, but I don't see myself going back and being active as a musical artist in the way I was like in my 20s. So I think the major piece of that part of my life has concluded. I'm inspired to share music, to still play my guitar and banjo, and to perhaps do something again with bandmates. But I'm just saying never on that scale again. So it'll all be just for the love of music and tribute to that. I think at some point the podcast will reach a full place, and so I think what's left undone for me in terms of my creative life here is to create some more literature, and that's it. I think I feel content. I don't. I'm open to the idea of partnership and family still, although I'm getting older, but I don't have like, that's not something that like I feel like I have to cross off to feel like I did everything I wanted to do here. That's more like I'm open to it. Like I'm open to living elsewhere. I don't have any plan to live elsewhere,
Yeah.
but I'm open to living in the Southwest. I think that would be beautiful. I don't know.
That's beautiful. Well, I just want to conclude today with just a little quote. And I don't know whether I got this, I got it from your podcast, but I don't know whether it's something that you said or that you were quoting someone else. But it really, it's so beautiful and it makes me think of you. So that's why I wanted to read it as a way of thanking you. And the quote is this: "It's beautiful when your heart is the temple where people can take refuge."
I don't remember saying that, but there's a lot of podcast episodes or who I was referencing. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry I can't give the source. But
But
could you say it one more time?
this is how I think of you though. It's beautiful when your heart is the temple where people can take refuge.
Wow. Yeah. It's such a nice energy to aspire to. I, I fall short of that all the time. I still get overpowered by frustration and anger and say things to people that I don't mean, and then I come back to this idea that peace is inner peace is accessible, and our heart is a temple, and when we tend to that temple and we radiate that peace, people feel that and know that they can come to you and find sanctuary in your energy, because you're not going to judge them, you're not going to provoke them, you're not going to try to draw out the worst in them. And even when I make mistakes, I still I'm still erring or trying to err on the side that I was just carrying in the wrong way. Um, and so I find like I am maturing on that level. Like I still say things and do things that are hurtful to people, but I'm getting better at improving my intentions and trying to build that energy overall, even though it's it's a work in progress. So thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for coming on. People are going to really enjoy discovering all the things that you have to offer. We'll put your notes, down below and people can get in touch with you. And I look forward to your book coming out because when you read the chapters, I was like, oh my gosh, just like the chapter heads moved me so much. Yeah, so
I'm
I can't
happy to
wait.
hear that. I really
I,
appreciate that. I'm
I can't.
excited for your book too.
Thank you. Thank you. I
I wish
appreciate
you
it.
all the best with the book, and everything you're doing is beautiful. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your friend and thankful for our connection and this opportunity to share time together.
Me too. Thank you.